The snow fell in thick, silent curtains, erasing the world. Elias Thorne gripped the heated steering wheel of his SUV, his knuckles white against the soft leather. The headlights cut a frantic, narrow tunnel through the swirling chaos, illuminating a universe of white that began and ended at his windshield. The wipers swished in a hypnotic, metronomic rhythm, a sound that had become the sole percussion of his life these past 2 years. Steady, repetitive, numb. He was a man who lived by rhythms now. Wake at 5, check the European markets, a silent breakfast with his son, Leo, a full day of calls and decisions from his home office, a fortress of glass and steel overlooking this same unforgiving forest. Then this drive, the 20 miles to his son's specialized school and the 20 miles back. It was a routine carved from the granite of grief, a structure built to contain the emptiness that his wife Sarah's absence had left behind. On the passenger seat, nestled in a padded box, was a half-finished wooden bird. Its wings were smooth, sanded down by his own hands over many lonely evenings, but its eyes were blank, unpainted. It was a project he and Leo had started months ago, another routine intended to fill a silence. But like so many things, it remained incomplete, a small monument to a life paused. He had meant to finish it tonight, to paint the small, bright eyes that would give it life. He just needed to get home. The tires bit into the accumulating snow, the vehicle's powerful engine a low growl against the storm's howl. The world outside was a tempest, a physical manifestation of the turmoil he so carefully kept locked inside. He preferred it this way. The external chaos made his internal stillness feel like a choice, like control. He navigated the winding mountain road with an ingrained familiarity, each turn a memory, each landmark a ghost. It was on the last major curve before the long straightaway to his estate that the world flickered. His headlights caught something, a shape that did not belong. Not a deer frozen in the glare, nor a fallen branch. It was a huddled mass of color against the stark white canvas of the snowbank. A dark blue coat, a flash of pink, another smaller shape in brown. Human. His foot hit the brake instinctively. The anti-lock system pulsed against his soul as the heavy SUV slid to a controlled stop, its lights painting the scene in stark, unforgiving detail. A woman was on her knees in the snow, her arms wrapped around 2 small children who were pressed into her body, as if trying to merge with it. Her head was bowed, her shoulders shaking, a portrait of utter defeat. For a moment, Elias was frozen. The world outside the warm cabin of his car seemed like a different dimension, a place of raw, brutal reality that he had spent 2 years insulating himself from. His first instinct, a cold and practical one, was to call for help. The sheriff's department, an ambulance. But the snow was coming down. Harder now, a thick, wet blanket that would be choking the roads. Help could be hours away, if it came at all. He saw one of the children, a little girl in a thin pink jacket, lift her head. Her face was pale, her lips tinged with blue. She wasn't crying. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the warm, glowing lights of his vehicle, as if it were a spaceship descended from another world. It was that look, not of fear, but of exhausted, hollow wonder, that broke through his paralysis. That was the look of a child who had gone past tears. He killed the engine, plunging the scene into a momentary darkness broken only by the faint ambient glow of the snow. The sudden silence was immense. He took a deep breath, the clean, filtered air of the car feeling like a stolen luxury. Then he pushed open the heavy door. The wind tore at him instantly, a physical blow of ice and fury. It ripped the warmth from him, screaming in his ears, and for the first time in a long time, he felt something other than the dull ache of memory. He felt the biting, urgent present. He pulled the collar of his expensive wool coat tighter around his neck and crunched through the snow. Each step was an effort against the wind. The woman didn't look up until he was standing just a few feet away, a dark silhouette against the storm. When she finally raised her head, her face was a mask of desperation and fatigue. Her eyes, wide and dark, were rimmed with a frozen tracery of tears. "Are you all right?" His voice was rough, torn away by the wind as soon as he spoke it. It sounded foreign, an intrusion into the storm's symphony. She didn't answer. She just shook her head, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. She hugged her children tighter. The little boy coughed, a dry, rattling sound that seemed to shake his whole tiny frame. Elias's gaze fell to their feet. The woman's boots were soaked through, dark with melted snow. The little girl's sneakers were caked in ice. They were not dressed for a blizzard. They were not dressed for a walk in a cool autumn breeze. He crouched down, bringing himself to her level. The wind whipped his hair across his face. "You can't stay out here. You and your children will freeze." He kept his voice low and calm, the tone he used with Leo when his son woke from a nightmare. "My home is just up the road. It's warm. Please let me help you." She looked at him then, truly looked at him. She saw the expensive coat, the confident set of his jaw, the deep worry in his eyes. She was seeing a stranger, a man in a powerful machine who had appeared out of a blizzard. Fear warred with desperation on her face, but then her son coughed again, a harsh, painful sound, and the fight went out of her. The last ember of resistance was extinguished by a mother's love. She nodded, a single jerky motion. Elias moved without hesitation. He gently took the little boy from her arms. The child was surprisingly light, a fragile bundle of cold limbs. He wrapped his own coat around the boy as best he could and carried him toward the SUV. The boy didn't protest. He simply leaned his cold cheek against Elias's chest and closed his eyes. He settled the child into the heated leather of the back seat, next to Leo's empty booster. He turned back for the others. The woman was struggling to her feet, her own legs stiff with cold. She held her daughter's hand in a grip of iron. As he reached out to steady her, to help her stand, the frayed end of a single dark blue thread from the cuff of her worn coat snagged on the button of his suit jacket. For a brief second, they were physically connected, a fragile, tenuous line tethering two strangers together in the heart of the storm. He gently unhooked it, his fingers brushing against hers. Her skin was like ice. He helped her and the girl into the back of the car, then shut the door, sealing them inside the bubble of warmth and quiet. He got back into the driver's seat, the cold clinging to his clothes. He turned the engine back on and cranked the heat, directing the vents toward the back. The silence inside was thick, punctuated only by the whisper of the fans and the muffled roar of the wind outside. He looked in the rearview mirror. The woman was stripping off the children's wet gloves and hats, her movements clumsy but determined. Her name was Clara, though he did not know it yet. The little girl was Maya, and the boy was Sam. In that moment they were simply refugees from the storm, and he, for reasons he didn't fully understand, was their sanctuary. He put the car in drive and pulled away from the snowbank, leaving the place of their desperation behind in the swirling white. The half-finished wooden bird on the passenger seat seemed to watch him, its unpainted eyes a silent question. The house was less than a mile away, but the drive felt eternal. The silence in the car was a living thing, filled with unspoken questions and the shuddering breaths of the children as warmth began to seep back into their small bodies. Elias didn't speak. He focused on the road, on the familiar gates of his property that loomed out of the snow like the entrance to another world. The gates swung open automatically, and he drove up the long, winding driveway, the tires crunching on the pristine snow. His home was not a cabin. It was a sprawling structure of dark wood and vast panes of glass, a modern fortress designed to both embrace and defy the wilderness around it. Lights were on, casting warm, golden rectangles onto the snow-covered lawn. It was a beacon of warmth and stability in the heart of the storm. As he pulled into the heated garage and the heavy door rumbled shut behind them, the roar of the wind was finally vanquished, replaced by the gentle hum of the house's life support systems. He turned off the engine and the last of the outside world fell away. "We're here," he said softly. "You're safe now." He got out and opened the back door. The woman, Clara, was already helping her children out of their wet outer layers. Her hands shook, but her focus was entirely on them. Elias reached in and lifted the little boy, Sam, who was now half asleep. He led the way through a side door into a spacious mudroom, the heated slate floor a blessing against the cold. "Leave the wet things here," he instructed gently. "I'll get you all some dry clothes." Clara nodded, her eyes darting around the room, taking in the clean lines, the expensive fixtures, the sheer scale of the place. It was so far removed from the cold, desperate world she had inhabited just minutes before that it felt like a dream. She knelt and began to unlace her daughter's frozen sneakers, her fingers fumbling with the icy knots. Elias carried Sam into the main living area, a vast, open-plan space with a soaring ceiling and a wall of glass that looked out into the blizzard. A fire was already laid in the enormous stone fireplace, unlit. He knelt and placed the sleeping boy on a deep, soft sofa, pulling a cashmere throw blanket over him. The boy sighed in his sleep, burrowing into the warmth. He went to the fireplace, and with the press of a button, a hidden ignition system brought the logs to life. Flames licked at the dry wood, and within moments, a cheerful, crackling fire was pushing back the room's ambient chill. The firelight danced on the polished wooden floors and reflected in the dark glass of the windows, creating a comforting illusion of a world contained within these four walls. When he turned back, Clara was standing in the archway, her daughter Maya clinging to her leg. They were both in their sock feet, looking small and lost in the cavernous space. Maya's eyes were wide, fixed on the fire as if she had never seen one before. Clara's gaze was on her son, sleeping peacefully on the couch, and the look of profound relief on her face was almost painful to witness. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice raspy. I don't know what we would have done." "There's no need for thanks," Elias said, his voice softer than he intended. "Get warm. I'll find you something to wear, and I'll make some soup." It was a simple, practical list, a way to create order out of the chaos that had just breached the walls of his carefully controlled life. He went upstairs, moving through the silent, immaculate house. It was a beautiful home, a showpiece, but it was not a warm one, not in its soul. It was a house that was lived in, but not alive. He went first to Leo's room. It was tidy, with toys arranged in neat bins and books stacked perfectly on shelves. He found a set of soft fleece pajamas and a pair of thick socks for Maya, and a smaller set for Sam. He hesitated, then picked up Leo's favorite stuffed bear, a worn, one-eyed creature named Barnaby. Then came the harder task. He walked to the end of the hall and pushed open the door to the master bedroom. He never slept in here anymore. He used one of the guest rooms. This room was a museum, a shrine to a life that had ended. He walked to the closet and slid the door open. Sarah's clothes were still there, hanging in neat rows, smelling faintly of her perfume. The scent hit him like a physical blow, a ghost's gentle punch to the gut. He stood there for a long moment, his hand hovering over the fabrics. It felt like a betrayal, a violation of this sacred space. But the image of the woman downstairs, shivering in her thin, damp clothes, pushed the feeling away. This was not about the past. This was about the present. He chose a simple set of gray sweatpants and a thick, soft cashmere sweater. They were practical things, warm things. He laid them on the bed, along with a pair of his own thick wool socks. As he turned to leave, his eyes caught a small wooden box on Sarah's dresser. He opened it. Inside, nestled on a velvet lining, was a simple silver hair clip. He remembered her wearing it, a small star in her dark hair. On a sudden impulse, he picked it up and closed it in his palm. Downstairs, Clara had settled Maya on the rug before the fire. The little girl was watching the flames, her pale cheeks slowly regaining their color. Clara was sitting on the edge of the sofa, watching her son sleep, her hand resting lightly on his back. When Elias returned, she looked up, her expression a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. He handed her the children's clothes first. "The bathroom is just down that hall," he said, pointing. "There are warm towels." She took the clothes, her fingers brushing his. "Thank you," she said again, her voice stronger now. She led Maya away, and Elias was left alone with the sleeping boy and the crackling fire. He watched the flames, feeling the unfamiliar weight of other people's lives settling into the quiet corners of his house. It was a strange feeling, not unwelcome, just strange. A few minutes later, Clara returned. She was wearing Sarah's clothes. The sweater was too big for her, the sleeves rolled up at the cuffs, but the soft gray fabric seemed to envelop her in a gentle embrace. Her wet, dark hair was towel-dried, falling in damp waves around her shoulders. She looked different. The desperation was gone from her eyes, replaced by a profound, bone-deep weariness. She didn't sit down. She just stood by the fire, holding her hands out to the warmth. Elias held out the small object in his palm. "I thought, your hair," he said, gesturing vaguely. He saw that her own hair tie, a simple elastic band, was frayed and stretched. She looked at the silver clip in his hand. It was a small, beautiful thing, a star-shaped piece of delicate silver. It was an act of kindness so specific, so thoughtful, that it completely undid her. After hours of holding herself together for her children, of fighting against the cold and the fear, this tiny, unexpected gesture of care was the thing that finally broke through her defenses. Her eyes filled with tears. "Oh," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. She didn't bother to wipe it away. She simply looked at him, her gaze conveying a depth of gratitude that words could never touch. She had been fighting for survival for so long, she had forgotten what it felt like to be cared for. Elias felt a pang in his own chest, a strange, unfamiliar ache. He simply placed the clip on the mantelpiece. "It's there if you want it," he said, and then, needing to do something, anything with his hands, he turned and walked toward the kitchen. "I'll get that soup started." The kitchen was a chef's dream of stainless steel and dark granite, a space designed for entertaining, though it had not been used for that purpose in years. Elias moved with an efficiency born of routine, pulling a carton of organic tomato soup from the pantry, a loaf of artisanal bread from its drawer. He worked in silence, the only sounds the clink of a spoon against a pot, the quiet hum of the induction cooktop. Clara eventually followed him, drawn by the simple, comforting sounds of a meal being prepared. She had gathered her daughter, who was now dressed in Leo's warm pajamas, her small face sleepy but content. Maya sat at the large kitchen island, her legs swinging, while Clara stood nearby, watching Elias. "Can I help?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, hesitant. She was a guest here, a stranger who had been plucked from a snowstorm, but her nature was to nurture, to contribute. "It's almost ready," Elias replied, not looking at her. He was stirring the soup, his focus intent on the pot. He was building walls again, retreating into the safety of a simple task. Having her here, wearing his dead wife's clothes, standing in the kitchen where Sarah had once laughed and cooked, it was too much. "My name is Clara," she said softly into the silence. And my children are Maya and Sam. He stopped stirring. He turned to look at her. Elias, he said. He didn't offer his last name. It didn't seem to matter. My son's name is Leo. He'll be home from school tomorrow if the roads are clear. The soup was served in heavy ceramic bowls. They ate at the kitchen island, a small makeshift family huddled in the warm heart of the house. Maya ate eagerly, her weariness forgotten in the face of a warm meal. Clara ate slowly, as if savoring not just the food, but the feeling of safety that came with it. Elias found he wasn't hungry. He watched them, this woman and her child, who had been brought into his life by a storm. He felt like an observer in his own home, watching a scene unfold that he had no part in writing. After they ate, Clara's exhaustion was palpable. Elias showed her to a guest room, a comfortable space with a large bed and its own bathroom. He had already brought Sam in and tucked him into one side of the bed. Maya climbed in next to her brother, curling into a small ball, under the thick duvet. Clara stood at the door, her hand on the frame. I have no way to repay you for this, she said, her voice low and heavy with the weight of her situation. We have nothing. Get some rest, Elias said, his voice gentle. That's all. The storm is supposed to last through the night. We can figure things out in the morning. He was a man who solved problems. This was just another problem, albeit a more complicated one than quarterly reports and market projections. That's what he told himself. He closed her door softly and went back to the main living area. The fire was burning low, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. He sat on the sofa where Sam had been sleeping, the indentation in the cushion still there, a faint trace of another life. He looked around the vast, silent room. For the first time in 2 years, the house didn't feel empty. It felt occupied. And the silence was not one of absence, but of peace. It was the quiet of a house where children were sleeping safely upstairs. Later that night, long after the house had settled into a deep and profound stillness, Elias found he couldn't sleep. The ghosts in his home had been stirred. He went downstairs and found Clara sitting at the kitchen table, a mug of tea cradled in her hands. She was staring out the large window at the relentless snow which had not abated. She looked up as he entered, not startled, but as if she had been expecting him. The children were asleep. The immediate crisis had passed. And now, in the quiet solitude of the late night, the space for heavier things had opened up. The air was still, safe, and thick with unspoken stories. He made himself a cup of tea and sat down opposite her. They didn't speak for a long time, simply sharing the quiet companionship, two sentinels watching the storm. It was Clara who finally broke the silence. Our car broke down about 5 miles back, she said, her voice barely a whisper. The heat went out first. I thought we could walk to the next town. I didn't know. I didn't realize how bad the storm would get, or how far it was. She looked down at her hands, at the worn, faded sweater she was wearing. It was stupid. I put my children in danger. You were trying to survive, Elias said. It wasn't an absolution, just a statement of fact. She looked up at him, her dark eyes searching his. My husband, David, he always took care of everything. He was a carpenter, strong, capable. He died a year ago. A fall at a construction site. She said it plainly, the raw facts stripped of their emotional agony by a year of repetition. After that, it was just one thing after another. The medical bills, the lost income. I was a nurse, but I had to stop working to take care of the kids. The savings ran out. We lost the house last month. She took a shaky breath. We were on our way to my sister's in the city. It was our last hope. We sold everything we had left just to buy that old car and get enough gas. And then, her voice trailed off. She didn't need to finish. The story ended in a snowbank on the side of a mountain road. Elias listened without interrupting. He recognized the domino effect of tragedy, the way one loss could trigger a cascade of others. He knew what it felt like to be standing in the wreckage of a life, wondering how it had all fallen apart so quickly. "I feel like I've been underwater for a year," she said, looking back out at the snow. "Just moving through the motions, trying to keep their heads above the surface. I never thought it would come to this." The phrase resonated deep within him. Underwater, that was it. That was the perfect description for his own life since Sarah's death. He had been moving through a world that felt thick and muted, his own emotions submerged. He found himself speaking, the words coming from a place he kept locked away. "My wife, Sarah, she died 2 years ago." He looked at the fire, now just a bed of glowing embers. "It was a car accident, a patch of black ice not far from here. She was on her way to pick up Leo from school. It was instant. They said she didn't suffer." He recited the words like a mantra, the cold comfort the police officer had offered him on that terrible afternoon. "I was in a board meeting in the city," he continued, his voice low and flat. "My phone was off. By the time I got the news, it was all over. I never got to say goodbye. 1 minute she was here, and the next, she was just a memory." He stopped, the silence in the room pressing in on him. "After that, I shut everything down. I sold our house in the city. I built this place. I focused on my work and on Leo. I thought if I could just control everything, create a perfect, predictable world, I could keep him safe, keep myself from feeling that again." They sat in the shared space of their grief, two people from different worlds who had found a common desolate ground. The storm outside raged on, but inside, in the quiet kitchen, a different kind of storm had been weathered. By sharing the stories of their loss, they had made the burden a little lighter. It was a fragile, tentative connection, forged in the dead of night, witnessed only by the falling snow. The next morning the world was transformed. The storm had broken, and a brilliant cold sun shone down on a landscape buried in a thick blanket of pristine white snow. The roads were impassable. They were snowed in. Elias called Leo's school, a small private institution with boarding facilities, and arranged for his son to stay there another night. There was no way to get him home. Clara woke with a sense of disorientation. For a moment she didn't know where she was. The soft bed, the quiet room, the warmth. It was all so foreign. Then the memory of the previous night rushed back. She looked over to see Maya and Sam still sleeping soundly, their faces relaxed and peaceful for the first time in weeks. A wave of profound gratitude washed over her. Downstairs she found Elias in the kitchen making pancakes. The smell of melting butter and warm maple syrup filled the air. He had found a high chair for Sam and set a place for Maya at the island. It was a scene of such simple domestic normalcy that it made her heart ache. "Good morning," he said, his tone neutral, but his eyes were less guarded than the day before. The shared confession of the night had changed something between them. That day, a quiet rhythm began to establish itself. Clara, unwilling to be a passive guest, insisted on helping. She cleaned the kitchen with an efficient grace, tidied the living room, and sorted a load of laundry. She was not just cleaning, she was infusing the sterile, perfect house with a sense of life. She hummed as she worked, a soft, almost unconscious sound that filled the quiet spaces. Elias found himself watching her. He had a staff that came twice a week to clean, but this was different. Clara wasn't performing a task. She was nesting. She was turning his house into a home, and the transformation was both unsettling and deeply comforting. In the afternoon, Maya and Sam, now rested and fed, discovered the wonders of the house. They found Leo's playroom, a space filled with every toy a child could desire. They played for hours, their happy shrieks and laughter echoing through the halls. Elias, working in his office, found the sounds distracting at first, an intrusion, but then he realized he was smiling. He couldn't remember the last time there had been the sound of children laughing in this house. Even Leo had become a quiet, somber child since his mother's death. Later, he looked in on them. Clara was on the floor with them, showing Maya how to build a tower of colorful blocks. Sam was pushing a small wooden train around a track. As Elias watched, unseen from the doorway, Maya's tower tumbled down. She let out a frustrated cry. Clara didn't scold her. She simply reached out, her hand gently stroking Maya's back. "It's okay, sweetie," she said softly. "We can build it again. Sometimes things fall down. The important part is starting over." The simple words struck Elias with the force of a revelation. He had been so focused on preventing anything from falling, on building his life into an unbreakable fortress, that he had forgotten the simple truth of rebuilding. The next day, the roads were still closed. The quiet domesticity continued. That afternoon, a small crisis erupted. Sam, playing with Leo's toys, accidentally dropped the wooden bird from the passenger seat. It had been left on a side table. One of its delicate, half-finished wings snapped off. Sam's face crumpled and he burst into tears, terrified that he had broken something in this strange new place. Elias heard the commotion and came out of his office. He saw the broken bird on the floor, and his first reaction was a sharp, irrational pang of anger. It was another broken thing, another unfinished piece of his life. But before he could say a word, Clara had scooped up a crying Sam and was examining the bird. "Oh, look at this poor little fellow," she said to Sam, her voice soothing. "He's hurt his wing, but I think we can fix him." She took the bird and the broken wing to the kitchen table. Elias watched as she found a bottle of wood glue in a utility drawer. With the steady, precise hands of a nurse, she carefully applied a thin line of glue to the broken edge and pressed the wing back into place. She found some rubber bands and wrapped them gently around the bird to hold the wing tight as it dried. Her movements were calm, competent, and full of a gentle purpose. Maya, who had been watching with wide eyes, came to stand beside her. "Can you fix everything, Mama?" she asked, her voice full of childish awe. Clara smiled, a sad, gentle smile. She smoothed Maya's hair back from her forehead. "No, my love," she said softly. "Nobody can fix everything. Some things, when they break, they stay broken. But we can fix what matters. We can mend the things we love and help them fly again." She looked at the small, repaired bird, and then her eyes lifted and met Elias's across the room. In that moment, he understood that she wasn't just talking about a wooden toy. She was talking about their lives, about his life. His heart, which he had guarded for so long, felt a distinct, painful, and yet hopeful crack. The following day, the plows finally cleared the main road. Elias drove into town to pick up Leo. The reunion was quiet, as it always was. Leo was a serious child, with his father's dark eyes and a solemnity that was too heavy for a 6-year-old. He hugged his father dutifully and got into the car without much fuss. "There are some people staying with us," Elias said as they drove. "A woman named Clara and her 2 children, Maya and Sam. Their car broke down in the storm." He wasn't sure how to explain it, so he stuck to the simple facts. Leo just nodded, looking out the window at the towering walls of snow on the side of the road. When they arrived home, Clara and her children were in the living room, reading a book by the fire. They all looked up as Elias and Leo entered. For a moment there was a tense silence. 3 children, strangers to one another, sizing each other up. It was Maya who broke the ice. She slid off the sofa, clutching a small doll, and walked right up to Leo. "Hello," she said. "I'm Maya. Do you want to see my dolly?" Leo looked from Maya to his father, then back to Maya. He gave a small, shy nod. Within minutes, the 3 of them were on the floor, engrossed in the complex world of childhood imagination. The integration was seamless, natural, and immediate. The adults could only watch, marveling at the simple, uncomplicated acceptance of children. That afternoon, Elias saw his son Truly laugh for the first time in what felt like an eternity. The three children were in the backyard, a vast expanse of untouched snow. Clara had bundled them all up, and they were having a snowball fight. Leo, who was usually so reserved, was running and shouting, his face flushed with joy, his laughter echoing in the crisp winter air. Elias stood at the window, watching. Clara was in the middle of it all, laughing along with them, her cheeks red from the cold. She looked up and saw him watching. She smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that seemed to light up the whole snowy landscape. And in that moment, the fortress around Elias's heart did not just crack. It crumbled. That evening, after the children were all asleep, exhausted from their day in the snow, Elias found Leo's sketchbook left on the coffee table. He idly flipped through it. There were drawings of cars, dinosaurs, and superheroes. But the last drawing was new. It was a crayon drawing of their house. A big, smiling sun was in the sky, and walking toward the front door were 5 stick figures, 2 big ones holding hands, and 3 smaller ones also holding hands. Below it, in Leo's wobbly 6-year-old printing, was a single word, home. Elias stared at the drawing, a lump forming in his throat. His son, in his simple, innocent way, had drawn a picture of a future Elias hadn't even dared to imagine. He had drawn a picture of a family. He had drawn a picture of hope. He carefully tore the page from the sketchbook and folded it, placing it in his pocket. It felt as heavy and as precious as gold. The days that followed settled into a new kind of normal. Clara and her children stayed. It was an unspoken agreement. There was nowhere else for them to go, and neither Elias nor Clara wanted them to leave. The house, once a silent monument to grief, was now filled with the constant, chaotic, beautiful noise of a family. Clara's presence was a quiet revolution. She filled the pantry with groceries, not just the gourmet items Elias's personal shopper delivered, but with cereal, juice boxes, and animal crackers. She put a vase of wildflowers gathered from the edge of the woods on the kitchen table. She rearranged the furniture in the living room, pulling the sofas closer to the fireplace to create a cozy, intimate space. She was, piece by piece, turning Elias's house into their home. Elias found himself changing, too. He started leaving his office door open. He took breaks in the afternoon to play with the children in the snow. He found himself looking forward to dinner, not for the food, but for the conversation, the shared stories of their day. He was slowly, cautiously, coming back to life, but the ghost of his past was not so easily banished. One afternoon, a week after the storm, Clara collapsed. 1 minute she was helping Sam with his coat. The next, she was a heap on the floor of the mudroom. Elias rushed to her side. Her skin was burning, her breathing shallow. She had a raging fever. He carried her upstairs to her room, his heart pounding in his chest with a terrifying, familiar rhythm. He called his personal doctor, who promised to come as soon as he could. As he sat by her bedside, placing a cool cloth on her forehead, a cold dread began to seep into him. The scene was too familiar. The hushed room, the sick person in the bed, the feeling of utter helplessness. It was a visceral echo of the last days of a different illness, a different life. Though Sarah's death had been sudden, there had been a terrifying health scare the year before, a week spent in a hospital waiting for test results. The fear he had felt then, the gut-wrenching terror of losing her, came rushing back with the force of a tidal wave. The doctor confirmed it was a severe case of influenza, exacerbated by the exhaustion and malnutrition she had suffered before the storm. He prescribed medication and rest. For the next 3 days, Elias became the sole caregiver for everyone. He fell back into his old patterns of control and efficiency. He managed the children's schedules with military precision. He administered Clara's medication exactly on time. He cooked and cleaned with a robotic competence, but the warmth that had been growing inside him was gone, replaced by a cold, polite distance. He would bring Clara trays of food, check her temperature, and ask if she needed anything, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. He wouldn't sit with her. He was there, but he was absent. He was protecting himself. The fear of losing her, a woman he had only just found, was so immense that he began to sever the connection before it could be broken by fate. If he didn't let himself love her, it wouldn't hurt when she was taken away. Clara, weak with fever, sensed the change. She saw the fear in his eyes, the way he held himself stiffly, the way he retreated into himself. She knew he was terrified, and she knew it had nothing to do with her flu. It was the ghost of his wife, standing between them. On the fourth day, her fever broke. She woke feeling weak but clear-headed. Elias brought her breakfast, his movements as precise and impersonal as ever. He set the tray down and was about to leave when she spoke. "Elias," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Stay, please." He hesitated, his hand on the doorknob. He turned, but he wouldn't look at her. He stood like a statue by the door. "You're afraid," she said gently. It wasn't an accusation. It was an observation. He remained silent, his jaw tight. "I know you are," she continued, pushing herself up against the pillows. "I see it in your eyes. You're afraid that you'll lose me the way you lost her." The words hit him like a physical blow. He flinched. He finally looked at her, and his eyes were filled with a raw, desperate anguish. "I can't do it again, Clara," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I can't go through that again. The helplessness, the waiting, the end." "So you would rather have nothing?" she asked, her voice still gentle but with an edge of challenge. "You would rather be alone in your perfect safe house than risk feeling anything at all?" He walked to the window, his back to her, and stared out at the snow. "You don't understand." "I do understand," she said, and her voice was closer. She had gotten out of bed and was standing a few feet behind him. "I lost David. I know what it's like to have your world ripped apart. I know what it's like to be afraid to ever let anyone in again. But being alone is not safe, Elias. It's just lonely." She reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. At her touch, the dam he had so carefully constructed for 2 years finally broke. A shudder ran through his body, and a low, guttural sob escaped his lips. He turned and buried his face in her shoulder, and he wept. He cried for Sarah. He cried for the life they had lost. He cried for the years he had spent in the cold, gray numbness of grief. And he cried out of sheer terror and relief at the thought of letting someone else in. Clara held him, her own tears falling silently onto his hair. She didn't offer empty platitudes or reassurances. She just held him, a steady, warm presence in the storm of his grief. She was his anchor. When his sobs finally subsided, he pulled back, his face raw with emotion. He looked at her, his eyes clear for the first time. "I'm so afraid," he said. "I know," she whispered, her hands cradling his face. "Me too. But love isn't about never feeling pain, Elias. It's about promising to be there to help each other through it. It's about choosing to hold on, even when you're scared." He looked into her eyes, and he saw not just a woman he was falling for, but a partner, a woman as strong and resilient as the mountains outside their window. He leaned in and kissed her, a kiss that was not about passion, but about promise. It was a kiss of recommitment, a choice to step out of the past and into a frightening, beautiful, and uncertain future, together. In the weeks that followed, the last of the winter snow melted, giving way to the tentative green of spring. The world outside was coming back to life, and so was the world inside the house on the mountain. Elias and Clara's relationship deepened. settling into a comfortable, loving rhythm. The house was no longer his or hers, it was theirs. They built a new life from the pieces of their old ones. They had family dinners every night, the table filled with the chatter and laughter of 3 children. They went for walks in the woods as the wildflowers began to bloom. They read bedtime stories, all 5 of them piled onto one bed. They were not just a couple falling in love. They were a family being forged. Elias saw the change in his son most of all. Leo was no longer the solemn, quiet boy he had been. He was bright and happy and full of life. He adored Maya and Sam, and he had come to love Clara with a simple, trusting heart. She was the mother he barely remembered, brought back to life. One evening, Elias was tucking Leo into bed. "Daddy," Leo said, his voice sleepy, "is Clara going to be our mommy now?" Elias smoothed his son's hair back from his forehead. "Would you like that?" he asked softly. Leo nodded, a wide, sleepy smile spreading across his face. "Yeah," he whispered, "she knows how to fix things." The simple, profound truth of his son's words settled deep in Elias's heart. Clara did know how to fix things. She had fixed the broken bird. She had fixed the lonely silence of his house, and she had fixed the broken pieces of his own heart. He knew with a certainty that left no room for doubt what he had to do. The next day, he took Leo with him to a small, independent jeweler in town. He didn't want a large, impersonal diamond. He wanted something with meaning. He found a simple, elegant ring with a small sapphire, the color of Clara's eyes. He planned the proposal carefully. He didn't want a grand gesture. He wanted it to be as real and as heartfelt as their love had become. He wanted it to be about family. That Saturday they were all having a picnic by the small lake on his property. The sun was warm, the air was sweet with the smell of pine and damp earth. After they ate, while Clara was helping Maya and Sam skip stones on the water surface, Elias turned to his son. "Okay, buddy," he said, his heart hammering in his chest. "Are you ready?" Leo nodded, his eyes wide with the importance of his mission. Elias handed him a small, intricately carved wooden box. It was the box that had once held the silver hair clip. Leo took the box and walked solemnly over to Clara. "Clara," he said, his voice serious, "my daddy has a question for you." Clara turned, a questioning smile on her face. She knelt down to be at his level. Leo held out the box. "He wants to know if you'll be our mom forever," he said, "and he wants to know if you'll marry him." Clara's smile faltered, her eyes filling with tears. She looked from Leo's earnest face to Elias, who was now walking toward her, his own eyes shining with emotion. She took the box from Leo and opened it. Inside, nestled on the velvet lining, was the sapphire ring, sparkling in the afternoon sun. Elias knelt in front of her, taking her hand. "Clara," he began, his voice thick with feeling, "from the moment I found you in that storm, my life has been transformed. You and your children brought light and laughter back into a world that had gone dark. You taught me how to live again, how to love again. You showed me that the bravest thing a person can do is to choose hope. I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life building our home together. Will you marry me?" Through her tears, Clara laughed, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, of course I'll marry you." He slid the ring onto her finger. It was a perfect fit. Maya and Sam, seeing their mother's happy tears, ran over and threw their arms around her. Leo joined the hug, and Elias wrapped his arms around all of them, pulling his new, beautiful, chaotic family into his embrace. They were a circle of love, complete and unbroken, under the warm spring sun. They were married 2 months later, on a perfect day in late summer. The ceremony was not held in a church or a grand hall, but in the backyard of their home, on the very spot where Elias had first seen Clara smiling in the snow. It was a small, intimate affair with only a few close friends and family present. Clara wore a simple, elegant white dress, and in her hair she wore the silver star-shaped clip that Elias had given her on that first night. Elias wore a simple linen suit, his face relaxed and full of a deep, quiet happiness. But the true stars of the ceremony were the children. They stood beside Elias and Clara as they exchanged their vows. Leo held the rings on a small silk pillow. Maya and Sam stood together, holding a bouquet of wildflowers they had picked themselves that morning. Their vows were not traditional. They were promises written from the heart, a testament to their unique journey. "Clara," Elias said, his voice steady as he looked into her eyes, "I found you in a storm, a woman of incredible strength, protecting your children from the cold. But in truth, you were the one who saved me. You were the shelter I didn't know I was looking for. You cleared away the storm inside my own heart. I promise to be your partner, your friend, and your safe harbor for all of my days. I promise to love and cherish Maya and Sam as my own. With you, I am finally home." Clara's eyes shone with tears as she spoke her own vows. "Elias," she began, her voice soft but clear, "you appeared out of the darkness like a miracle. You gave my children and me warmth and safety when we had nothing. You looked at a family that was broken and lost, and you saw something worth saving. You taught me that it's okay to be vulnerable, that it's okay to be cared for. I promise to fill our home with love and laughter. I promise to love Leo with all my heart. I promise to stand by you, to weather any storm for the rest of my life. You are my love, and you are my peace." At the end of the ceremony, before the final pronouncement, the officiant asked the children to come forward. Leo spoke first, his voice clear and proud. "Love is about fixing things that are broken." Then Maya spoke, her small voice carrying on the summer breeze, "and building a new home together." Finally, little Sam, prompted by his sister, added his own contribution. "And family," he said happily, "is forever." With the blessings of their children, they were pronounced husband and wife. The kiss they shared was full of joy, relief, and the profound, peaceful certainty of a love that had been tested and had not been found wanting. Later that evening, after the guests had departed and the children were tucked into their beds, dreaming soundly, Elias and Clara sat together on the sofa in front of the fireplace. The fire crackled merrily, casting a warm, golden glow on their faces. A soft cashmere throw was draped over their laps. Clara leaned her head on Elias's shoulder, her hand resting over his on her knee. The sapphire on her finger caught the firelight, a tiny, brilliant star in the warmth of the room. "Can you believe it?" she whispered, her voice full of wonder. "Can you believe that just a few months ago I was kneeling in a snowbank on the side of the road thinking my life was over?" Elias tightened his arm around her, pulling her closer. "And I was driving home on that same road, thinking my life was just a series of empty routines I had to get through." He looked into the flames, his expression thoughtful. "It's amazing, isn't it? How one moment, one decision, one turn in the road can change everything." "You didn't have to stop," she said, looking up at him. "You could have driven right by. Most people would have." "I almost did," he admitted quietly. "But then I saw Maya's face, and I saw my own son's loneliness in her eyes. I didn't know it then, but I think I stopped for myself as much as I stopped for you." They sat in a comfortable silence for a long time, the fire and the crickets outside, the only sounds in their peaceful world. The house was no longer a fortress against the world, but a sanctuary filled with love. The ghosts of the past had not been vanquished, but they had been integrated, their memories now a part of the beautiful, complex tapestry of their new family. "You know," Clara said softly, tracing the lines on his hand with her finger. That drawing Leo made, the one of our family coming home. Elias smiled. He had framed it. It now hung in the hallway, right next to a beautiful family portrait they had taken just last week. The crayon drawing and the glossy photograph, the dream and the reality, side by side. I remember. That's what this is, she said, her voice full of a quiet, powerful conviction. This isn't a story about a rescue, Elias. It's not about a wealthy man saving a poor woman. It's a story about 5 broken people who found each other in a storm and chose to build a home together. We didn't save each other. We made each other whole. He turned and kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar, comforting scent of her hair. He looked around the room, at the children's toys peeking out from under a chair, at the half-finished puzzle on the coffee table, at the small, repaired wooden bird that now sat on the mantelpiece, its painted eyes seeming to watch over them. He was right. Leo was right. Clara was right. Love was about fixing what was broken. It was about choosing a family, and it was about, finally, truly, coming home.